Welcome to our first intermediate lesson. And the topic is kaoru,
出会い
which basically means meeting people. Okay, so these intermediate lessons, we are focusing on spoken Japanese or colloquial Japanese. And part 1 of this lesson, expressions, phrases and questions you'll be asked by Japanese. So we're going to focus on what Japanese will say and ask to you, and then in part 2 we will look at the answers. So our first expression is something you already know, kaoru.
はじめまして
Okay, most textbooks will translate this to mean how do you do. But if we have a look at the word hajimemashite, we can think of the word hajimete, which means first. So you could think of hajimemashite as this is our first time to meet. Is that right, Kaoru?
Yes, that's right, Nick.
Great. Well, that was easy, so let's move on to our next question.
いつ日本に来たの
Again, this is another one you probably already know. Simply asking, when itsu Nihon ni Japan kita no? So you could think of no as an informal question particle or just a colloquial question particle. So if we wanted to say this more politely, Kaoru, what would we say?
いつ日本に来ましたか
And as an example, I could say last week. So, 先週に来ました。
はい
Okay, maybe before or after this, they might ask you the question, where are you from? Kaoru?
どこから来たの
And it's probably one we've already studied and that you already know. Moving on to our next expression, Kaoru.
いつまで日本にいるの
So, いつまで until when, Nihon ni Japan, iru no. Until when are you in Japan? Another way to ask this, Kaoru, is
どのくらい日本にいるの
one more time, please.
どのくらい日本にいるの
And that one would translate to how long are you in Japan? Okay, we're going to look at the answer of that in the next lesson, but just remember, those were 2 ways that you may be asked, how long are you in Japan for? Okay, let's have a look at this one. Kaoru.
なんで来たの
Okay, so when you are speaking to Japanese, and if you actually are in Japan, you've got to be aware of what you're talking about. So Kaoru didn't say Japan in this sentence, but the question is asking, why did you come to Japan? Is that right, Kaoru?
Yes.
So if you were going to be a bit more helpful, let's say, trying to make it easy to understand, what would you say?
なんで日本に来たの
Okay, so, but basically, yes, when you're in Japan, you've got to be on the ball. You've got to be thinking, okay, they're asking me questions about Japan. They've just asked, nande kita no? They're asking me, why did I come to Japan? So Japanese drop the subject, the object. You've got to be very aware of what you're talking about. And then if you can do that, you'll become a fluent speaker. Or a fluent understander. So, but yes, and then you'd give your reason. So if you had come to Japan to study, you could say, how would you say that, Kaoru? I came to Japan to study.
勉強しに来ました
勉強しに来ました. If it was travel,
旅行です
we're going to look at the answers of that question in part 2. So our next question.
何していますか
So this, if we just have a look at the question, it could, or it does mean, what are you doing? But again, in the context of the conversation, if you're meeting someone, meeting a Japanese person in Japan and they're asking you this question. They're asking you, what are you doing in Japan? Yes?
Yes.
Moving on.
どこに住んでいますか?
どこに where 住んでいますか? 住んでいます is the present progressive of 住む, which means to live, as in to live in a house or to live somewhere. So this is not asking you about which country you live in or anything like that. It's asking you where you live, in this case in Japan. So you would say, let's say you lived in Kyoto, you would say Kyoto ni sundeimasu. Is that right, Kaoru?
Yes. If you live in Japan.
If you live in Japan, yes.
Yes.
Or
People not ask you this question if you stay in Japan.
Stay in
Just
Japan.
for few days
few
or
weeks.
something.
Okay, you're right. So yes, obviously if you said to this question, Itsumare nihon ni iru no, and you said, oh, sarainen, or 2 years from now, or rainen made desu, until next year, then you've established that you must be living in Japan. Good point there. Thank you, Kaoru. Okay, Japanese will often ask you your age when they first meet you, so it's kind of surprising, but there's a few ways to ask your age, and one way is
年は?
and that's basically, what's your age? And I don't know why Japanese like to ask that question. They also will like to know if you're married or single, or if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So toshi wa, and you could just say your age. So in my case, 37歳です. Another way to ask this, Kaoru, is 何歳ですか? Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you say that?
Correct.
Oh, sorry.
何歳ですか?
Kaoru sensei, 何歳ですか?
内緒です。
内緒です. It's a secret. Ah,
Isn't it rude?
sorry. It is very rude. Okay, moving on to our next question that you'll be asked a lot.
日本食は食べれますか?
Okay, Nihon. We know Nihon means Japan. Shoku is the word for meal or food. So this whole one word. Sorry, Kaoru?
Cuisine.
Cuisine. Okay. So, yes, Nihon shoku, we can say Japanese food. Yes?
Yes.
Wa taberemasu ka? Now, this is the potential form of the verb taberu, which means to eat. So, taberemasu ka? A literal translation would be, can you eat Japanese food?
Yes.
Now, of course, you can eat Japanese food, but this question is really asking, can you handle Japanese food? Japan has great food, and I think most Japanese are pretty proud of their food because it's unusual compared to other countries. You've got the raw fish and all this other incredible food you'll discover if you go to Japan. So they're asking if you, what are they really asking here, Kaoru? If you like Japanese food, or you can handle Japanese food?
Yes. Handle Japanese food. Because we know some foreigners can't eat raw fish.
Raw fish,
or
yes.
something else. And we know, so we want to hear,
Yeah.
I can eat sashimi.
Okay.
And then we are happy.
Oh, really? Okay. So something you're kind of proud that only Japanese can eat raw fish kind of thing. But yeah, and Japanese will also ask you if you can, or if you go eating with Japanese and they see you using chopsticks, they'll be somewhat surprised and they'll compliment you on using your chopsticks. And how do you say that, Kaoru? Like, they sort of say something like, 箸上手ですね.
箸上手に、箸使い
Mm.
上手ですね。とか
So that the way you use your chopsticks is
good.
is good or excellent or something. So there we have it. Can you handle Japanese food? One more time, Kaoru.
日本食は食べれますか？
Okay, here's a question we've put in, and I actually experienced this one when I was working in Japan. I was working in a restaurant, and I was polishing glasses one day, and a female co-worker came up and said this.
もう慣れましたか？
And I had no idea what she was talking about. We were talking about Japan, but we sort of stopped talking, and then she came back and just said this question, and I couldn't understand. And she didn't know enough English to explain what it meant, and she sort of said, don't worry. So what it means is, have you come accustomed to life in Japan? So nareru is the verb to get used to.
Yes.
More is, I guess, already. So are you already used to life in Japan? Or naremashita ka? So in this context of meeting people in Japan, of course it's about Japan. But
We use this expression very often, not to meet
not to meet people.
first time, but if you start new school or new job or something like that.
So it's quite possible that co-worker could have been asking if I'm used to Japan or maybe used to the new job. So yeah, so again, that's why understanding the context of your conversation is important.
Yes.
So it could be, but I mean, yeah, if you've started something new or if you're living in a new country, as in Japan, you should be able to work it out if you understand it. And now you understand it, so hopefully you'll get used to using or hearing more narimashita ka. And finally, a little tricky word here.
連絡先教えてくれる？
So Kaoru, this word, please.
連絡先。
So renraku is contact. Saki is point or place. So you could think of this point of contact. Renraku saki, oshiete kureru. Oshieru is to teach or to tell. So oshiete kureru, this is a request. Can you tell me your contact details? And so in this case, Kaoru, contact details or renraku saki could be, what could that be?
Your phone number? Or address? Or email address? Or...
Okay, so any of those. So I guess in these days now, everyone's giving either their phone number or email.
I think not the residential address. If you want to know address, we ask 住所.
住所教えてください.
Phone number.
Phone number. All right. So there we have it. Expressions, phrases, and questions you'll be asked by Japanese when they first meet you. So in part 2, we're going to look at the answers of these questions.